Mr. Chairman, would it be possible to get some therapy dogs in here for my colleagues on the other side of the aisle?
We could ask Mr. Raskin's shrink to.
I'm worried about their mental stability. You know, I think it's funny, Mr. Chairman, when I hear my colleagues on the other side of the aisle whining and complaining.
those
about
are insults, to be clear.
Elon Musk. Excuse me, this is my time, thanks. Elon Musk and, you know, how much money he donated to President Trump, yet I don't recall the same outrage when, you know, billionaires on their side of the aisle like Mark Zuckerberg, George Soros, you know, or any of the other ones that were donating massive sums of money to their side of the aisle. Mr. Resch, I want to start with you real quick. I read something you stated in your testimony. You said, rather than a bloated bureaucracy, we face a workforce stretched too thin, forced to oversee an increasingly complex web of outsourced operation with limited personnel and resources. Is that correct? Did you say that in your testimony, sir?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to read you a list of priorities over at USAID right now, one of the agencies that Elon Musk, who's triggered my colleagues on the left so much, the Agency for International Development, which had a budget of over $40 billion in fiscal year 2023. This is not a exhaustive list. It's a very small list, but $1.5 million to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion in Serbia's workplaces and business communities. $2.5 million for electric vehicles in Vietnam. $2 million for sex changes and LGBT activism in Guatemala. $6 million to fund tourism in Egypt. Hundreds of thousands of dollars for a nonprofit linked to designated terror organizations, even after an inspector general launched an investigation. Do you still stand by your comments, sir?
Yes, my comments were in regards to the ability of administrators to adequately oversee the funds that Congress has appropriated to them for these programs.
Yeah, so you don't think this is a bloated workforce when we're spending money overseas like that? Sir, are you aware that we're over $36 trillion in debt, Mr. Resch?
Yes, I certainly am.
Okay, so you still stand by your comments that this isn't a bloated federal workforce?
The federal workforce represents 4% of the entire budget. For every
Sir, do you know how much? Do you know what the annual deficit is every year?
Please.
It's over $2 trillion.
I understand that.
Okay, so you still stand by your comments that it's not a bloated workforce?
$2 trillion is not reflective of the workforce that is the federal employee.
Oh, it's not? We're not spending money on the workforce?
Your entire budget, 4%. If you cut the entire workforce, 4% would be reflected.
Do you know why often we use private companies and contractors in the federal government, sir? Because you can actually fire them. It's a lot easier to fire them if they're not performing. Sir, have you ever ran a large organization or a small business?
No, I have not.
I just find it interesting that we bring in a governor of one of the United States who has actually run a state to talk about all the cuts, the elimination of fraud, waste, and abuse, and how she's got her state high-performing and made a bunch of changes so that they actually have a surplus. And my Democrat colleagues bring in a professor who's never run a large organization, never run a small business, and therefore has really no idea what it's like to deal with the consequences of out-of-control spending and inefficiencies. Does that strike anybody else in the room as odd? What about you, Mr. Schatz? Who are you going to take advice from on efficiency? Somebody who's actually run a large organization or business or maybe a state? And I'm not trying to throw shade at Dr. Resch and his profession. There's been a lot of professors in my life that have brought me a lot of value. But when we're talking about trying to add efficiencies to the largest government in the history of the world that's operating at $36 trillion national debt, $2 trillion annual deficit, Mr. Schatz, who are you going to take counsel and advice from?
Well, I think anyone who has an idea about how to cut spending should be welcome, and that could include academics, it can include nonprofit groups, governors. So the point is to get the job done, not to keep talking about it.
That's right. And the last thing I'll say is, because my Democrat colleagues are losing their mind with Elon Musk, don't forget that Elon Musk campaigned with the president. The American people were very excited about Elon Musk using all of the tools and experience that he has and that he's used in the private sector to come in and streamline this federal government. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.